September 8, 2004, Cedar Ridge, Washington. The crisp morning air, smelling of damp pine and diesel, was the same as always. But when the 7:05 a.m. school bus pulled away from the corner of Elm and 3rd, 14-year-old Sam Mitchell had vanished. His Walkman, playing a mixtape of the Eagles, was left behind in the gravel, a silent testament to a trust shattered in an instant. The vinyl siding on the Mutsuman Mitchell house gleamed under a weak September sun, the morning mist still clinging to the manicured lawns of Cedar Ridge. Inside, the familiar sounds of a school day scramble were underway. The gurgle and hiss of the coffee maker, the stacky voice of a talk radio host from a plastic clock radio, the screech of a dial-up modem from the family's beige Dell computer in the den. It was a symphony of ordinary life. Frank Mitchell, a man whose shoulders had begun a permanent slump, sipped his coffee from a chipped World's Best Dad mug and scanned the sports section of the Cedar Ridge Gazette. The print was fading, much like the town's main street. "You see, the Mariners blew it again," he grumbled to no one in particular. His wife Carol, a woman with a kind face etched with the permanent worry of a nurse, was packing 2 lunches at the yellow Formica counter. One was for their daughter, Jenny, a vibrant 16-year-old, currently hogging the bathroom. The other was for their son, Sam, a ham and cheese on wheat, an apple, and a bag of chips. An ordinary lunch for an ordinary boy. Sam, 14, was already at the kitchen table, his head bowed over a sketchpad. His Discman, a treasured hand-me-down from his sister, sat next to him, a tangled white cord leading to his ears. The faint, tinny thump of a drum beat leaked out. He was sketching a detailed eagle, its wings spread. Inspired by the album art of one of his beloved classic rock bands, Sam. "For the 10th time, turn that down and eat your cereal," Carol said, her voice a practiced mix of love and exhaustion. "You're going to miss the bus." Sam reluctantly pulled one headphone away. I'm going. Jenny burst into the kitchen, a cloud of fruity body spray preceding her. She was all low-rise jeans and belly-bearing tops, the uniform of 2004. "Mom, have you seen my new lip gloss?" The Bon Bell one. She spotted Sam's Discman. Are you still listening to that old people music?" The Eagles. "Seriously? Everyone listens to Linkin Park now." Sam shrunk a little, his shoulders curling inward. "It's better," he mumbled, not looking up from his drawing. "It's ancient," Jenny retorted, grabbing a Pop-Tart from the box on the counter. Jenny. "Be nice," Carol said automatically, her attention on wrapping the sandwiches in wax paper. "Sam, your lunch is on the counter. Don't forget it." Frank finally looked up from his paper, his eyes landing on his son. He saw the slouch, the quiet defiance in the set of his jaw, the headphones that walled him off from the world. It reminded him of his own awkward years. Though his soundtrack had been the Beatles, not whatever angry noise the kids liked now. "You finished that history project?" Frank asked, his tone more abrupt than he intended. Sam shook his head, still focused on his drawing. "Almost. I'll finish it tonight." "Procrastination is the thief of time, son," Frank said, parroting his own father. "Don't leave things to the last minute. And keep your wits about you at that bus stop. Head down, do the work. Don't just trust anyone who offers you a shortcut, you hear? The world isn't all maple trees and clean sidewalks." It was a speech Sam had heard 100 times. The life lesson of caution, of self-reliance, delivered with the morning coffee. Sam just nodded. "I know, Dad." He finally stood, shoving the sketchpad into his backpack. He slipped the Discman into the front pouch, the cassette of his meticulously crafted mixtape, Sam's Classics, peeking out. He grabbed his lunch bag from the counter. "Love you, honey," Carol said, planting a quick kiss on his cheek. He flinched, a 14-year-old's reflex, and wiped it away with a grimace. "Mom," he complained, Call me if you're staying after 4. Anything, she called after him as he headed for the front door. The phone in the art room never works, he called back, his voice already fading down the hallway. The screen door slammed shut with a familiar bang. Frank returned to his paper. Jenny argued about needing money for a new CD. Carol looked at the yellow Formica counter and saw the lone, forgotten lunch bag sitting there. Sam, your lunch. She called out, snatching it up and hurrying to the front door. She yanked it open and stepped onto the porch, the cool morning air hitting her face. She looked down Elm Street toward the corner of 3rd where the bus stop was, but he was already gone. He'd turned the corner, a lanky boy in a blue hoodie, swallowed by the shade of the large pine trees that lined the sidewalk. She stood there for a moment, the forgotten lunch in her hand, a small, significant mistake on an ordinary Wednesday morning. She sighed, deciding she'd just drop it off at the school office later. It was no big deal. It was just a lunch. The silence after the slamming of the screen door felt heavier than it should have. Carol stood on the porch for a long moment, the forgotten lunch bag a small, weightless anchor in her hand. The street was quiet now, just the rustle of a few early fallen leaves skittering across the pavement. She could hear the distant diesel groan of the school bus making its way up Hawthorne, 2 streets over. It was a sound as regular as clockwork. The 7:05 a.m. Driven for 15 years by old Bud Miller. She went back inside, the lunch bag still in her hand. He forgot this, she said, placing it on the counter. Frank didn't look up from his paper. He'll be hungry by 3rd period. Teach him to be more mindful. Jenny was now frantically searching through her oversized purse. A tapestry bag covered in sequins. I can't find my phone. Has anyone seen my phone? The cordless landline handset for the kitchen phone was in its cradle. A bulky, transparent piece of plastic that showed its inner circuitry. Check your room, honey, Carol said, her voice distant. She picked up the lunch bag again. Maybe I'll just run it over to the school office later. I have the late shift today. That's enabling him. Carol, Frank muttered from behind the sports section. Meanwhile, at the corner of Elm and 3rd, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and the faint, damp earthiness of the coming autumn. Sam Mitchell stood alone, as he usually did. He shoved his hands deep into the pockets of his hoodie, his backpack heavy on his shoulders. He could hear the approaching rumble of the bus. He fumbled in the front pouch of his backpack, his fingers finding the familiar rectangular shape of his Discman. But it felt wrong, lighter. He unzipped the pouch and his heart sank. He'd brought the wrong one. This was his empty backup case. His good one, the one with his precious mixtape inside, was still on the kitchen table. A wave of frustration washed over him. First the lunch, now this. His dad's voice echoed in his head. Procrastination. Be more mindful. Asterisk the bus was getting closer. He thought of the long, silent bus ride. The jeers from the kids who listened to rap and metal. The empty, music-less day stretching ahead. It was too much. A reckless, impulsive decision sparked. He looked back toward his house, just 100 yards away. He could see the porch, the empty swing. He could run back, grab the Walkman, and be back before the bus finished its stop at the next corner. It would be tight, but he could make it. It was a small risk, a tiny rebellion against the crushing ordinariness of the morning. He thought of the Eagles' "Take It Easy" waiting for him on that tape, a secret comfort against the world. He made his choice. He dropped his backpack behind the large, gnarled roots of the old oak tree that marked the bus stop. A silent signal to any other kids not that there were many that he'd be right back. Then he turned and ran, his sneakers pounding the pavement, back toward home. He didn't take the sidewalk. He cut through the Johnsons' side yard, a shortcut he'd used 1,000 times. The dew from their perfect lawn soaking the cuffs of his jeans. He was focused only on the music, on fixing his small mistake. He never looked back. At that exact moment, the boxy yellow nose of the bus rounded the corner, its red lights flashing. Leo Bud Miller, a man in his late 60s with a cap pulled low over his eyes, brought the vehicle to a hissing stop. He peered out the large windshield. The stop was empty. He saw the backpack, a dark blue lump against the tree roots. He sighed. Kid must have run home for something. Happened all the time. He checked his watch, a bulky digital Timex. He was a minute ahead of schedule. He could wait a moment. He opened the door, the familiar hydraulic sigh filling the morning air. He leaned out. Sam Mitchell. You coomin' or what? Silence. Just the chirping of birds. Bud had a routine. He had to keep to the schedule. The high school kids were next, and they were a finicky bunch. He couldn't wait all day. He closed the door, the rubber seal whispering shut. He put the bus in gear, the transmission grinding slightly, and pulled away from the curb. He'd see the kid on the return loop if he missed him, or his mom would probably drive him. It was no big deal. In his rearview mirror, the abandoned backpack grew smaller and smaller. A single, silent detail on a perfectly normal street corner. The bus turned onto Maple, and the corner of Elm and 3rd was still and quiet once more. The only evidence of Sam Mitchell, a set of fading footprints in the wet grass of the Johnsons' lawn. Detective Marjorie Crow arrived at the Mitchell house. Just after 9:30 a.m., she drove an unremarkable, slightly worn Ford Crown Victoria. A car that blended perfectly into the landscape of Cedar Ridge. She'd been on the force for over 30 years. And her face, while not unkind, held a permanent layer of professional skepticism. The call had been a missing juvenile, but in a town like this, it usually meant a teenager had stayed out past curfew or was sulking in a friend's basement. Carol. Mitchell opened the door before Crow could even ring the bell. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a fear that was already beginning to crystallize into something colder and harder. He's not here. He's not at school. No one has seen him. The words tumbled out in a rush. Frank stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder, his own expression a tight mask of controlled panic. There's been a mistake. He must have, I don't know, gotten on the wrong bus? Something. Crow stepped inside, her eyes taking in the neat, dated living room, the floral-patterned sofa, the wood-paneled television set, the collection of ceramic knickknacks on the mantel. It was a home preserved in a gentle amber of the late 90s. Let's start from the beginning, she said, her voice calm and measured. A tool she used to drain the hysteria out of a situation. When did you last see Sam? Carol led her to the kitchen, the scene of the crime of forgotten lunches. She recounted the morning in minute detail, the argument about the music, the forgotten lunch, her trip to the porch. Seeing him turn the corner, he never misses the bus, Frank interjected, his voice firm. He's a good kid, a responsible kid, except he forgot his lunch and his music player, Crow said, her eyes landing on the Sony Walkman still sitting on the kitchen table. It was an older model, a cassette player. Nostalgia, unbidden, tapped her on the shoulder. She remembered her own son wanting a Discman, the newfangled CD player, for Christmas a few years back. This was an relic. The bus driver, Carol said suddenly. Bud Miller. He must have seen something. Crow nodded, making a note in a small, leather-bound notebook. She preferred it to the digital tablets the younger officers were starting to use. We've already dispatched a car to speak with him. In the meantime, can I see Sam's room? Sam's room was a time capsule of adolescent interests. Posters of classic rock bands, the Eagles, Led Zeppelin were tacked to the wall next to detailed pencil sketches of birds and fantasy dragons. It was a quiet room. A thoughtful room. Crow's eyes scanned the titles on the bookshelf. Tolkien, a book on birdwatching, a few fantasy paperbacks. There was no computer. That was in the den, a family computer. She opened the closet. Clothes were neatly hung. She looked under the bed. Nothing but a few dust bunnies and a sketch pad. She flipped it open. The drawings were good, full of motion and detail. The last one was of the old oak tree at the bus stop, its branches rendered with painstaking accuracy. Downstairs, her radio crackled. It was the officer who had spoken to Bud Miller. Detective. The bus driver confirms he stopped at Elm and 3rd at approximately 7:05. He states the stop was empty. But he saw the boy's backpack left against the tree. He waited a moment, called out, then proceeded on his route. He assumed the boy had run home for something and missed him. Crow felt the first cold trickle of professional dread. It was a small detail, but it was wrong. A kid running home for a forgotten item might leave his lunch. He wouldn't leave his backpack. That was his life. His books, his homework, his wallet. Thank you, unit. Secure the bus. I want it taken out of service and brought to the impound for processing. And I want a CSU at the bus stop. Now. She turned to the Mitchells, who were watching her, hanging on her every word. Frank's arm was around Carol, who was clutching the forgotten lunch bag like a talisman. He left his backpack, Crow said, her voice still calm, but a new intensity in her eyes. The driver saw it. He didn't get on the bus, and he didn't come back here. The color drained completely from Carol's face. Then, where is he? That was the question. Crow looked past them, out the kitchen window to the quiet, sun-dappled street. The maple trees, the clean sidewalks. Frank's morning warning to his son echoed in her mind. Don't just trust anyone who offers you a shortcut. The small, forgotten mistakes of a morning were colliding, and the pristine facade of Cedar Ridge was showing its first hairline crack. The bus, a hulking yellow artifact numbered 214, sat in the impound lot behind the police station, looking out of place among the sedans and pickup trucks. Detective Crow stood beside it, pulling on a pair of latex gloves. The forensics team, a young man and woman in pristine white jumpsuits, were already at work, dusting the exterior door handle and the steps with fine black powder. Focus on the first 3 rows on the right-hand side, Crow directed. That's where he usually sat, according to the sister. Inside, the bus smelled of old vinyl, chewing gum, and the faint, metallic temps of adolescent sweat. Sunlight streamed through the large, grimy windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Crow walked slowly down the aisle, her eyes scanning the floor, the seats. She saw the usual detritus, a broken pencil, a wadded-up note, a single neon-colored jelly shoe. It felt like a museum exhibit on late 20th century school life. The forensic tech, a woman named Lisa, looked up from the stepwell. Not a lot of clean prints, detective. It's a school bus. It's a zoo of partials. Just do the best you can, Crow said, her voice low. Her radio crackled. It was the officer at the bus stop. Detective Crow, we've found something. She left the claustrophobic silence of the bus and drove the few blocks back to Elm and 3rd. The scene was now cordoned off with yellow crime scene tape. A shocking slash of color against the muted autumn backdrop. A small cluster of neighbors stood on their porches, watching silently. Officer Davis, a young man with an earnest face, pointed to the base of the large oak tree. We found the backpack right where the driver said it was. It's been processed. School books, a binder, a geometry set. No wallet, no phone. Crow nodded. That tracked. A kid would take his wallet with him if he ran back home. And the other item? Davis held up a clear evidence bag. Inside was a black Sony Walkman. It was an older model, the kind that played cassettes. It looked small and helpless in the large bag. It was lying in the gravel, about 5 feet from the backpack. The cassette was still inside. It's a mixtape, hand-labeled Sam's Classics, Volume 2. Crow took the bag. She could see the cassette through the plastic, the handwritten label in a teenager's careful script. The Eagles, Hotel California, was visible on the handwritten track list. She felt a pang, a deep, unwelcome stab of nostalgia. She remembered making mixtapes for her high school boyfriend, the careful curation of songs, the ritual of pressing the record and play buttons simultaneously. It was a labor of love. This was Sam's. The strange thing, Detective Davis continued, his brow furrowed. No prints. We lifted the backpack, got a bunch of partials, probably Sam's, his sister's, his parents'. But the Walkman, it's clean, wiped. There's a faint smudge on the plastic casing, like it was wiped down with a cloth. Crow's blood ran cold. The professional dread now a freezing river in her veins. A forgotten lunch was a mistake. A dropped Walkman was an accident. A wipe-clean Walkman was a message. It was intentional. It was the first act of the unsub, a deliberate erasure. Someone had picked up that Walkman, held it in their hand, and carefully removed all traces of themselves from it before placing it back on the ground. It was a taunt, a signature. She looked from the backpack, left in its hiding spot, to the Walkman, placed deliberately in the open. Two different stories. One was of a boy who intended to come back. The other was of someone who wanted to leave a clue, but a clean one. A ghost of a clue. She keyed her radio. I need a canvas of every house on this street and the 2 surrounding blocks. I want to know if anyone saw anything, anyone out of place. Any vehicle that wasn't supposed to be here between 7 o'clock and 7:15 this morning. And I want a bolo for Sam Mitchell. 14, blue hoodie jeans. Assume he is with an unknown adult. She looked down at the evidence bag in her hand. The silent cassette tape, a repository of a boy's favorite songs, was now the loudest piece of evidence they had. It wasn't just a discarded object. It was a statement. And the statement was, asterisk, I was here, and you will never find me, asterisk, the small. Trusting world of Cedar Ridge, a world of mixtapes and paper routes, had just been violated by a cold, calculating intelligence. The Mitchell house had become a command post. The air thick with the smell of stale coffee and unspoken dread. The landline phone rang incessantly calls from concerned relatives, from the school, from a local news reporter. Each ring was a fresh jolt of anxiety. Frank Mitchell had taken to pacing from the living room to the kitchen and back. A useless circuit that wore a path in the beige carpet. Jenny sat curled on the sofa, clutching her Nokia phone, her thumbs frantically texting her friends. Asterisk number 1 has seen him. This is so weird. Police are here. Asterisk Detective Crow sat at the kitchen table with Carol. The forgotten lunch bag still between them like an unanswerable question. Tell me about Sam's friends, Crow said. Her notebook open. Carol's laugh was a short, brittle sound. Friends, he has. Acquaintances. He's quiet. He gets along with the kids in his art class, I think, but he doesn't have anyone over. He's always been a loner. She looked toward the den where the family computer sat. He spends a lot of time online. In those chat rooms. For his music, Crow's instincts, honed over 3 decades, twitched. The online world was a new frontier, a place where the old rules of small-town trust didn't apply. Which chat rooms? I don't know the names. Something about classic rock. He said he found people who understood the music, not like the kids at school who made fun of him for it. Carol's eyes welled with fresh tears. He said they were his friends. The life lesson Frank had preached that very morning asterisk, don't just trust anyone who offers you a shortcut asterisk, now took on a terrifying digital dimension. The shortcut wasn't through the Johnson's yard. It was through a telephone line into a world of anonymous strangers. We'll need to look at his computer, Crow said gently. Frank stopped his pacing. You think someone he met online. But that's, yes, a smart kid. He wouldn't just get in a car with a stranger. The smart ones are often the most trusting. Mr. Mitchell, Crow said, her voice low. They believe others operate on the same level of honesty they do. They underestimate deceit. Just then, Officer Davis came in from the backyard, holding a small black electronic device in an evidence bag. "Detective, we found this in the bushes near the side of the house, close to where the footprints cut through the lawn." It was a key fob. A little black rectangle with a single button and a silver Ford emblem. "That's not ours," Frank said, peering at it. "I drive a Taurus." "That's for an Explorer, or a Bronco maybe." Crow took the bag. A key fob, dropped in the hurry of a snatch, or planted. It was too convenient to clean. Like the Walkman. It felt like another piece placed deliberately on the board. "Run this," she said to Davis. "Find out what year, what model. And get a list of every Ford SUV registered in Cedar Ridge and the surrounding counties. And I want a forensic tech to go over that family computer in the den. I want to know every website Sam visited, every person he talked to." She looked from the key fob back to Carol Mitchell's terrified face. The investigation was pulling in two directions. The physical evidence, the wiped Walkman, the key fob pointed to a cold, calculated abduction. But the digital footprint, the online friends. The chat rooms pointed to a seduction, a betrayal of trust that started not on a street corner, but on a screen. The boy who felt misunderstood in his own town had gone looking for connection in a place where identities were masks. And the consequences of that search were now echoing through the quiet, sun-drenched rooms of his home. The small mistake of trusting a stranger online was colliding with the colossal mistake of being in the wrong place at the exact wrong time. The digital forensics tech. A young man named Ben, who looked more like a college student than a police officer, sat at the Mitchell's family computer. The bulky CRT monitor cast a bluish glow on his face as his fingers clacked on the keyboard. Detective Crow stood behind him, watching the seemingly nonsensical strings of code and log files scroll by. "He's been using a program called MeRC," Ben said. "It's for internet relay chat. Old school, but still popular in niche communities." He navigated through a series of folders. He had a few favorite channels. Hashtag Classic Rack Lives, number 70, S Gold. Hashtag Eagles fans. "Can you see who he talked to?" Crow asked, her voice tight. "Working on it. The logs aren't great. It's not like modern social media. A lot of this is ephemeral." Ben clicked through several more windows. But he had a few private message conversations saved. Mostly just talking about guitar solos and album releases. He paused, his cursor hovering over a saved log file with a single name. Archivist. "This one's different," Ben said, opening the file. "The conversations are longer. More personal." Crow leaned in, reading the text on the screen. The timestamps were from the last 3 weeks. Asterisk, asterisk, archivist. Asterisk, asterisk, your knowledge of the Felder. Frey Rift is impressive for someone your age. Most kids just hear the songs on the radio. Asterisk, asterisk, Sam the Man 94, colon, asterisk, asterisk. My dad saw them in '77. He has all the records. The production on Hotel California is perfect. Archivist, it was a different time. The music had soul. Not like the processed noise today. People were connected. You had to really listen. Samthaman 94. I know. No one here gets it. They just call me a loser. Archivist, they called us all losers back then too. The quiet ones. The ones who preferred a good record to a crowded party. We had our own world. It was better. Crow felt a chill. This wasn't just a conversation about music. This was grooming. A slow, methodical building of rapport, of creating a sense of shared identity and isolation. She scrolled down to a conversation from 2 days ago. Archivist, I've been digitizing my old bootlegs. Some incredible live recordings from the '78 tour. The sound quality is amazing. You can't find this stuff anywhere. Samthaman 94. No way. I'd love to hear them. Archivist, I could make you copies. On cassette. The way they were meant to be heard. It has a warmth that digital files lack. Samthaman 94. That would be awesome. Archivist, I'm often in Cedar Ridge on Wednesday mornings for work at the archives. I could leave a box for you somewhere. A little treasure hunt. The final conversation was time-stamped 8:03 p.m. last night. Archivist, the old oak tree at your bus stop. I'll leave a small box in the roots tomorrow morning before 7. A little something to start your collection. Our secret, Samthaman 94. Okay, thank you. Seriously, Crow straightened up, her jaw clenched. Our secret. The words were a predator's classic tool. She turned to Officer Davis, who had just re-entered the kitchen. The key fob. Matches a late '70s to early '80s Ford Bronco, Detective Davis said. No GPS in those things. Untraceable. The pieces snapped together with terrible, logical clarity. The unsub wasn't a random opportunist. He was a planner. He was archivist. He had spent weeks earning Sam's trust, validating his interests, sympathizing with his loneliness. He had crafted the perfect lure, rare music, a shared passion, a secret. He knew the bus stop. He knew the routine. He knew Sam would be alone. The dropped key fob wasn't a mistake. It was a taunt, a piece of the puzzle he wanted them to find. A clue to his identity as a collector or archivist of the past. He hadn't just taken a boy. He had curated his disappearance. He had preyed on the child's trust and his desire to be understood, turning a mixtape into a weapon. The consequence of a small, digital trust was now a catastrophic reality. The Cedar Ridge Public Library was a fortress of quiet. A Carnegie building with soaring ceilings and the faint, sweet smell of aging paper. Detective Crow pushed through the heavy oak doors, the silence feeling like a physical presence after the escalating tension of the Mitchell house. She approached the main desk, where a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and a name tag that read Marion Head Librarian looked up from stamping. Due dates, Crow showed her badge. I'm looking for information on a patron. Possibly goes by the screen name Archivist. He would have used your public computers, likely with some frequency. Marion's friendly demeanor tightened into a mask of professional discretion. We protect our patron's privacy, Detective. This is about the Mitchell boy, Crow said, her voice low but firm. It's a matter of his safety. The librarian's resolve crumbled. She nodded, her eyes wide with concern. Oh dear. Yes, of course. She led Crow to a bank of 3 beige computers tucked away in a corner near the local history section. We have a sign-in sheet for time slots, she whispered, pointing to a clipboard. It's not strictly enforced, but most people use it. Crow flipped through the pages of the sign-in sheet for the past month. The names were a mix of seniors and teenagers. Then she saw it. Not every day, but consistently. Twice a week, usually in the afternoons. The same signature, G. Hewitt. The handwriting was precise, almost architectural. G. Hewitt, Crow said. Do you know him? Marion's face softened with recognition. Oh, Gary. Yes, of course. He's a regular. A very quiet man. He works part-time at the town archives, just down the street. He's always in here, researching local history. He loves the old things. She leaned closer, lowering her voice further. He's a bit, solitary, but always polite. He usually sits at that terminal. She pointed to the computer directly adjacent to the one in the corner, the one most hidden from view. Crow's gaze followed her finger. From that seat, Gary Hewitt would have had a clear view of the corner computer. The computer, the library records, which Ben was now cross-referencing. Confirmed was used by Sam Mitchell after school on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the past 6 weeks. He hadn't just met Sam online. He had been watching him, studying him, learning his schedule, his habits, his loneliness. He never bothered anyone, Marion continued, almost defensively. He'd just sit there with his notepad and his microfilm readers. He was always so interested in the old stories, the things everyone else had forgotten. The life lesson echoed again, this time with a new, chilling nuance. It wasn't just about not trusting strangers. It was about the danger of being seen by the wrong person, of having your loneliness and interests noted and cataloged by a patient, obsessive mind. Gary Hewitt hadn't forced his way into Sam's life. He had quietly, methodically, inserted himself into it, presenting himself as the one person who truly understood. The consequence of being seen and misunderstood was now a terrifying probability. Crow thanked the librarian and stepped back outside into the afternoon sun. She pulled out her radio. "I need an address for a Gary Hewitt, and I need a unit to check the town archives. See if he's there. Do not approach. I just want a location." The hunt was no longer for a ghost in a machine. It had a name. It had a face. It was a quiet man who loved old things and who, it seemed, had decided to collect something new. The town archives were housed in the basement of the Cedar Ridge Municipal Building, a place that smelled of damp concrete and photocopier toner. The officer on the scene, a fresh-faced rookie named Peters, met Detective Crow at the top of the stairs. "He's not here, Detective," Peters said. The door was unlocked. Lights were off. "Place is a mess, but the secretary next door said that's normal for him. Said he called in sick this morning. Said he never calls in sick." Crow descended the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the sterile silence. The archives were less an organized repository and more a chaotic sea of cardboard boxes, stacked haphazardly on metal shelves that stretched into the gloom. There were piles of old newspapers, their headlines yellowing, and maps of the town from decades past unfurled on a large table, held down at the corners by dusty paperweights. Her flashlight beam cut through the dim light, sweeping over the boxes. They were labeled in that same precise handwriting from the library sign-in sheet. Asterisk Water Department, 1975 to 1980. Property. Tax records, 1962. Chamber of Commerce. Photos, 1970s. Asterisk, she moved deeper into the room, toward a smaller, cluttered desk in the back corner. This was clearly Gary Hewitt's personal space. Unlike the organized chaos of the archives, this area was fastidiously neat. A blotter was centered perfectly. A pen holder held 3 identical black pens. And there, next to an old microfilm reader, was a single, framed photograph. Crow picked it up. It was a faded color picture from the late 1970s, judging by the hairstyles and clothing. A school dance. Streamers hung from a gymnasium ceiling. In the corner of the photo, standing alone by the punch bowl, was a skinny, awkward boy with glasses and a bad haircut. He was looking not at the camera, but at a group of other boys who were laughing, their backs to him. The loneliness in the boy's posture was palpable, even across 4 decades. It was a young Gary Hewitt. Her radio crackled. "Detective, we have an address for Hewitt. 1412 Pinecrest Drive. It's a small bungalow on the east side, near the old quarry. No priors. Not even a parking ticket. Set up a perimeter. Quietly. No sirens." "I'm on my way," Crow responded, placing the photograph back on the desk with a sense of profound dread. The lesson was shifting again, deepening into something far more tragic. This wasn't just about a predator and his prey. It was about a wound that had never healed. The quiet, bullied boy from the 1970s had grown into a man who had never left that gymnasium, who had never stopped staring at the backs of the laughing crowd. He wasn't just a collector of old records and town history. He was a prisoner of his own past, and his crime was an attempt to finally, in the most twisted way possible, rewrite it. He wasn't just taking Sam Mitchell. He was trying to rescue the ghost of his own teenage self from a loneliness that had, over 40 years, curdled into something monstrous. The consequence of childhood cruelty left to fester in the dark, silent places of a human heart was now playing out in real time. The bungalow at 1412 Pinecrest Drive was a study in stillness. Painted a faded, forgettable green, it sat beneath the shade of overgrown fir trees, its driveway empty. The only vehicle in sight was a restored 1978 Ford Bronco, its olive green paint and chrome grille gleaming with an obsessive care that stood in stark contrast to the weedy lawn. It was parked around the back, nearly invisible from the street, from her unmarked car parked a block away. Detective Crow watched the house through binoculars. No lights were on. The curtains were drawn. It was a house that didn't want to be seen. Team in position. She murmured into her radio. "Backyard is covered," a static-laced voice replied. No movement. No sounds from inside. The life lesson Frank Mitchell had imparted to his son now felt like a tragic, cosmic joke. The danger wasn't a stranger in a dark alley. It was a quiet man in a quiet house on a quiet street. A man who had built a fortress of nostalgia to keep the present world at bay. The consequence of underestimating the lonely, of dismissing the quiet ones, was now contained within those four walls. Crow gave the signal. The team moved in, a swift and silent flow of black uniforms against the green. There was no battering ram, no shouted commands. The front door was unlocked. It swung open on silent hinges, revealing a dim, wood-paneled interior. The air inside was stale, smelling of old paper, lemon polish, and something else, the faint, sweet scent of model airplane glue. The decor was a meticulous recreation of a late 1970s living room. A shag carpet, orange and thick. A console television with a small, curved screen. A turntable with a stack of LPs next to it, the Eagles, Boston, Fleetwood Mac, but it was the hallway that held their attention. Lining the walls were framed school photographs from Cedar Ridge Junior High, class of 1977 through 1979. The same group of kids, year after year. And in each photo, one boy was circled carefully in red ink. Gary Hewitt. The lonely boy by the punch bowl, his isolation now permanently, pathologically enshrined. Crow moved down the hall, her service weapon held low, her heart hammering against her ribs. The other officers cleared the kitchen, the bathroom, a bedroom filled with meticulously built model trains and dioramas of the town as it was in the 70s. She paused at the last door at the end of the hall. It was closed. A homemade sign, crafted with the careful lettering of a teenage girl, was taped to it. It read, "Peter's room. Keep out. Peter." The name from the 1979 Disappearance. The runaway Crow slowly turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room was a shrine, but not to Peter. It was a shrine to a time. A perfectly preserved adolescent's bedroom from 1979. A Star Wars poster. A Farrah Fawcett poster. A disco ball hanging from the ceiling. And in the bed, tucked under a blanket with a rocket ship pattern, lay Sam Mitchell. He was pale, his eyes wide with a terror that had passed beyond panic into a numb, shocked stillness. He was alive. He wasn't tied down. There were no locks on the door. The prison wasn't physical. It was psychological. A prison of polyester and pop culture, built by a warden who was trying to offer a boy the perfect childhood he never had. Sam looked at Crow. At the modern Kevlar vest and the semi-automatic pistol, a look of profound confusion on his face. He said he was saving me from the bullies. Sam whispered, his voice hoarse. He said this was a safe place. He said it was better back then. From the doorway to an adjoining small bathroom, Gary Hewitt emerged. He didn't look like a monster. He was a slight man in his late 40s, wearing corduroy pants and a plaid shirt. He held a vintage Polaroid camera in his hands. He looked at the police officers invading his carefully constructed world, not with anger, but with a deep, profound sadness. "You're too late," he said softly, his gaze drifting past them to the perfect 1979 room. "You're always too late for the quiet ones." The final, devastating lesson was clear. The danger wasn't always a knife in the dark. Sometimes it was a helping hand offered from the depths of a broken past, a hand that sought to rescue you by pulling you backwards, erasing your present and trapping you in someone else's haunted memories. The consequence of a community's long-ago neglect. A cruelty forgotten by everyone but its victim had finally and quietly come due. The fluorescent lights of the interrogation room hummed, a stark, modern sound that felt alien after the curated silence of the bungalow. Gary Hewitt sat perfectly still, his hands folded on the cold metal table. He didn't look at the two-way mirror, didn't fidget. He seemed relieved, as if a long, exhausting performance was finally over. Detective Crow sat across from him, placing a file folder on the table. She didn't open it. She let the silence stretch, watching him. "He's safe, Gary," she said finally, her voice quiet, devoid of accusation. "Sam Mitchell. He's with his parents. He's unharmed." A faint, sad smile touched Hewitt's lips. "He has a good eye for detail. His sketches. He captured the bark of that old oak tree perfectly. Most people don't see the details. This wasn't about his art, Gary. This was about you. This was about Peter." Hewitt's eyes flickered, the first crack in his calm facade. He looked down at his hands. "No one remembers Peter. He was a runaway. That's what they put in the paper. Case closed. Tell me about him." "He sat behind me in homeroom," Hewitt began, his voice taking on a distant, narrative quality. "He drew, too. Fantastical things. Dragons, spaceships. The other boys. They called him names. They'd steal his notebook, tear the pages. They tripped him in the hall. After the spring fling dance, I saw them. They surrounded him behind the school, shoving him, calling him a freak. I walked away. I was afraid. I was a coward." He looked up, his eyes glistening. "The next day, he was gone. Just gone. And everyone was relieved. The teachers, the other kids. The quiet, awkward boy was someone else's problem now. They forgot about him by summer. But I didn't. I never did." "So you built a room for him," Crow said. "I built the room he should have had. A safe place. Where the music was good and no one made fun of you for what you loved." He looked directly at Crow, his gaze intense, pleading for understanding. "Sam is like Peter. I saw him at the library, on that computer. I heard the kids at the bus stop, the names they called him. I saw the loneliness. I couldn't just walk away again. I couldn't be a coward twice." The life lesson settled in the room, heavy and absolute. It was about the cost of cowardice, of standing by while cruelty happened. Gary Hewitt's entire adult life had been a monument to a single moment of moral failure in his youth. His crime wasn't born of malice, but of a desperate, twisted need for atonement. He hadn't kidnapped Sam to harm him. He had saved him to save the ghost of the boy he failed 40 years ago. The consequence of that long-ago inaction was a life warped by grief and guilt, culminating in an act that traumatized a new boy and shattered a new family. He had tried to correct a past mistake by committing a monstrously larger one. "You didn't save him, Gary," Crow said, her voice firm but not unkind. "You stole his life, just like someone stole Peter's. The method was different, but the result is the same. A boy is gone from the world he knew. Hewitt stared at her, the sad smile gone, replaced by a look of dawning, horrifying clarity. He had not been the hero of his own story. He had become the very thing he feared. He had looked at a lonely boy and seen only a reflection of his own pain. Not a person with his own future, his own right to live in his own time. The final tragic twist was that in his quest for redemption, he had only succeeded in repeating the cycle of loss, proving that the path to hell is not only paved with bad intentions, but with good ones left to fester in the dark. The case was closed. The paperwork was filed. Gary Hewitt was in a psychiatric facility, awaiting trial, lost in the labyrinth of his own remorse. But for Detective Marjorie Crowe, the echo of the case wouldn't fade. A week after the arrest, she found herself driving through Cedar Ridge as the evening settled in, the streetlights flickering on, casting long shadows. She stopped her car a block away from the Mitchell house and got out. Walking slowly toward the corner of Elm and 3rd, the old oak tree stood as it always had, its branches a dark lace against the twilight sky. The yellow crime scene tape was gone. The gravel was neat and undisturbed. She stood there for a long time, the cool air biting through her jacket. She thought of Frank Mitchell's warning about shortcuts and misplaced trust. She thought of Sam's digital search for connection. She thought of Gary Hewitt's 40-year-old wound, festering in silence. Every character in this tragedy had been acting on a lesson they thought they understood, and every one of them had been blindsided by a consequence they never saw coming. The life lesson wasn't a simple slogan. It was a complex, painful tapestry. It was about the vigilance required to protect the vulnerable, yes. But it was also about the profound responsibility a community holds for its quietest members. It was about the danger of letting old hurts, both given and received, go unacknowledged and untreated. A moment of childhood cowardice, left to rot in the dark, had metastasized over decades into a monster that preyed on the very loneliness it saved. Understood so well. She looked at the Mitchell house. A single light on in an upstairs window. He was home. He was safe. But he was not unchanged. None of them were. The small, trusting world they had all taken for granted was gone, replaced by a more complicated, more fragile reality. The final, enduring lesson was one of humility. It was the understanding that the greatest dangers are not always the strangers in the night, but the unhealed scars carried by the people you see every day. It was a call to listen more closely, to see more deeply, and to have the courage to intervene with kindness before a lonely heart, left to its own devices, twists into something capable of unimaginable harm. The cost of neglect, whether of a child, a friend, or one's own past, was a debt that always, eventually, came due with interest. Crowe turned and walked back to her car, the weight of the lesson settling on her shoulders not as a burden, but as a duty. The case was closed, but the need for understanding, for compassion, for courage was never-ending. The final scene opens on a quiet, sun-drenched Saturday morning, 2 weeks later. The Mitchell family car, Frank's sensible Taurus, is parked at the Cedar Ridge overlook, a scenic spot high above the town. The leaves are a brilliant tapestry of red and gold. The family gets out, moving with a new, careful gravity. Sam stands by the guardrail, looking down at the grid of streets and rooftops, the school, the library, the tiny speck that was the corner of Elm and 3rd. He looks older. The softness of childhood has been chiseled away, leaving something more defined, more wary. Carol comes to stand beside him, not touching, just sharing the space. She doesn't offer empty platitudes. The silence between them is honest. Frank joins them, clearing his throat. He looks at his son, really looks at him, perhaps for the first time in years. "I was wrong, Sam," he says, his voice rough with emotion. "I told you not to trust anyone offering a shortcut. But I never told you. I never showed you. How to find the right people to trust. I was so busy warning you about the world, I forgot to teach you how to live in it. It's a monumental admission from a man built on certainty. The life lesson has been learned painfully by the teacher as well as the student. Sam nods slowly, absorbing this. He looks from his father's face, etched with new lines of regret and love, to his mother's, filled with a fierce, protective hope. He looks at his sister Jenny, who gives him a small, supportive smile from by the car. No longer teasing, but seeing him, he turns his gaze back to the town. It doesn't look small and safe anymore. It looks complex, full of both hidden dangers and quiet heroes. It looks real, I know, Sam says quietly. His voice is firmer now. I know. The camera pulls back, soaring away from the family on the overlook, showing the entire town of Cedar Ridge nestled in the Autumn Valley. It is no longer just a setting for a crime, but a living community, forever marked by a tragedy it never saw coming, but from which it is slowly, painfully, learning to heal. The lesson is not about fear. It is about awareness. Not about building higher walls, but about building stronger bridges. The story ends not with a case closed, but with a life and a family, cautiously, bravely. Beginning again, they say every case leaves a mark. A scar on a town, on a family, on the officer who closes the file. The Hewitt case. It left more than a mark. It left a question. How many quiet corners are there in this world, hiding quiet hurts that we're too busy to see? We learned that the greatest mystery isn't always whodunit. Sometimes it's why. And the answer is never simple. It's a ghost from 1979, a boy's loneliness in 2004, and the space in between where a good intention curdled into a terrible crime. The life lesson here. It's not just for the victims. It's for all of us. It's about the cost of looking away, the debt owed by cowardice, and the redemption that can only be found in courage. The courage to see the pain in others, and the greater courage to confront the pain in ourselves. Gary Hewitt will be judged by the state, but his real sentence was a life lived in the shadow of a moment he was too afraid to face. Sam Mitchell's sentence is to carry a knowledge of the world no child should have to bear. And our sentence, as a community, is to remember, to listen for the quiet voices, to notice the empty chairs. Because a scar is a reminder of a wound, but it's also a testament that you survived. And the lesson of the scar is to never let the wound happen again.